Right, a really huge and very, very warm welcome to all of you who are here today to chat about something that is very close to my heart, and that's weaning your baby. And I know it's something that causes an enormous amount of confusion, and so that's what we're going to be doing today. We're just going to be debunking all the confusion. I'm going to try and stick to only half an hour to 40 minutes of actual speaking, and I hope I'll answer most of your questions in that time. But if you do have other questions, please do use the Q&A below. If you just look below us, you'll see a Q&A little speech bubbles. Please do ask your Q&As there. And then I think we can get started. So out of interest, I'm going to stop the poll, and we will have a survey at the end, by the way. And the survey at the end of today, you are going to, if you fill that in, you're going to be in place to win a Weaning Sense book. So somebody who fills out the survey at the end of this session may win a Weaning Sense book. So in the meantime, that's not for the poll. I'm going to end the poll, and I'm going to just pop up the results so that we can all see who's in the audience. So we've got a majority of you who've got 3 to 6 month old babies. So you're right at the rock face, wanting to know what to do. A lot of you are battling with introducing textures. Quite a few, though, looking at timing of meals. So we'll look at that. By far, the majority of you have used the app, have a subscription or use the app. So that's fabulous. Right, okay, so I think without further ado, let us get started. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. Let's get the right screen up. Oh, goodness me, it's wanting me to put in my password to be able to share the sound, which we really need to do because today I've asked Kath to give us. Hopefully the sound is going to work today. Great. Okay, so let's get started, and without further ado, there we go. Right, so today we are going to be looking at when, how, and what to wean your baby onto. All right, so there's a huge amount of controversy, and I think that, you know, there are a number of different contentious issues when it comes to parenting, but I think the one that has the most airtime in the media with confusing messaging is actually feeding. And you can see here, just very confusing. Do we start solids at 6 months? Do we start it at 4 months? Do we wait for egg until 9 months? When do we introduce cow's milk? And it doesn't matter what your question is, there'll be a different opinion. And it's been very, very important to me and to Kath Megaw, who is my co-author of the book Weaning Sense, that we actually really just took the most sensible information and distilled it for you. And that's really what we did in the Weaning Sense book. A little bit about the app. Most of you probably know you should be able to have snapshots of your baby's week, a daily routine screen, which you access with a little heart at the bottom. And then each of these little squares up on the home screen, the pink square relates to the play section, which some of this hasn't been rolled out yet. We're rolling out things all the time on the app, but we've certainly got your daily activities. Your health screen is accessed by your bottom left-hand widget. And then your sleep screen is by your top left-hand widget. And then your feeding screen, as I said, top right-hand widget. What is coming? A lot more tracking is coming. So we've got diaper tracking, we've got teething tracking. Here you can see the teething tracking that's coming. So we've got lots and lots of fabulous stuff. Already rolled out are the activities and the recipes, which were rolled out late last year. Right, so let's get started. The first question, and I think one of the most common questions and the most conflicted questions, is when should I start my baby on solids? So there's a couple of things that you need to know about starting your babies on solids. The first one is that there's a window of opportunity. It's not a date, okay? It's not, this is the day that your baby has to start solids. You know, like when you're giving birth, there's kind of really, you know, kind of a 2-week period, but there's a day that you're told this is approximately your due date. But with weaning, it's totally different. It's a window, and it's quite a wide window, and it's based on recent science that tells us, A, when your baby's gut is ready, and B, when you shouldn't do it too early, too late. So in other words, we've got a start date and an end date. So the start date is 4 months. You should not start introducing solids before 4 months. Your baby's gut is not ready for solids, okay? But if you delay much after 6 months, there's reasons why you shouldn't delay too long after 6 months. One of those reasons is that babies really enjoy exploring textures and exploring flavors and exploring experiences between about 4 and 6 months of age. And as you get closer towards 9 and 10 months, they stop wanting to be as explorative. And so if we delay solids too late, you can end up with a picky eater. And I'm going to talk to that just now a little bit. But that window, so that you know, is sometime between 17 weeks and 24 weeks, which is between 4 and 6 months of age. When your baby's ready to go into solids, you'll just flick that little toggle up there at the top of your screen, and it'll ask you for the date that your baby started in solids. And that's important because the app will actually take you through an exact meal plan according to when your baby is introduced solid. So it really is important that you do pop that date in there. So how do we know that your baby's ready? So aside from that window period, 4 to 6 months, sometime in there, you've got to work it out. So how do you know the actual day? Well, I want you to look for 3 cues that your baby's ready. The first cue is that your baby is starting to explore their environment, that they're putting things to their mouth, and that they're starting to really show that they're very interested in the food that is on your plate. Okay, so they'll be sitting on your lap at a mealtime. They'll want to dig into your food on your lap, on your plate. They might want to reach for the food as it goes to your mouth. And that really shows us what is called engagement cues. And that is that your little one is starting to show that actually they're ready and they're eager and that they want to explore. Okay, we'll talk about some babies who do that very much earlier and why not to introduce solids then later. But at this point, if your baby's over 4 months of age and they're showing exploration and engagement cues, that's a good thing. The second thing is you're going to look for some physical cues. And the physical cues are things like they can hold themselves upright. They don't need to be sitting independently. So you might hear that rumor that your baby has to be sitting independently. Your baby will only sit independently from about 6 months onwards. So obviously at 4 months, they're not doing that. But it is important that the upper part of their body is upright and that their chin is off their chest. That's very important. So when you sit your baby on your lap, pop your arms around their hips over here or around their chest over here. And as you hold them, you'll see that they actually sit quite upright and quite robust. And that's really, really important as a cue for little ones to be ready for solids. You will also hear a rumor that if your baby pushes the food out their mouth, they're not ready. And that's in fact not true. Babies do still at this age have a little bit of a tongue thrust reflex, which is a reflex that says anything that goes into my mouth needs to be pushed out in case I can choke on it. And it takes them a little bit of time of getting used to something in their mouth for that reflex to go away. So don't worry if your baby pushes the food back out the mouth on the first day. All right. So in terms of introducing solids, one of the questions that comes up very often is allergens. And I know it was something that many of you flagged that you wanted to know about this. So this particular recipe that you can see here is one of our recipes from the Weaning Sense range, and it's in the Weaning Sense book. And it is a butternut and peanut butter recipe, and it's absolutely fabulous. It's a really, really awesome recipe as a starter food. So now you're saying to yourself, why on earth could this possibly be a starter food? Because you may have heard a rumor that peanut butter must only be introduced later. But in actual fact, new research shows that if we introduce allergens too late, you're more likely to get allergies. So let me take this back a little step for you. So in about towards the end of the last century, so in the 1980s, 1990s, everybody in the world became freaked out about allergies and children because allergies were increasing. And so science said, we think that allergies are increasing because babies are having allergens too early. So all allergens must be delayed very late. And in fact, my firstborn was born in the late 1990s. And that was the advice we were given. And so we did not introduce allergens until after 9 months of age. So that was things like egg whites, fish, peanuts, all of that type of thing. We really delayed it late. Of course, what ended up happening was that we had this massive surge in allergies in countries that were following this advice. So places like the UK and Australia had all of these allergies surging up. But places like Thailand and the Southeast Asia, where they did introduce peanuts to their babies, they didn't have these allergies. And so science started to look at it, and we realized, in fact, that by delaying allergens late, by moving them very late in that first year of life, we actually increase the risk. So babies need little exposures to allergens all the way through from conception. So here's an example. When you are pregnant, unless you're allergic to something, you should eat a lot of the different allergens, okay? Unless you're allergic to it. Obviously, if you're going to have anaphylaxis to peanuts, please don't eat it in pregnancy. But if you're not allergic to something, eat it in pregnancy, because a little bit of that will go through to your baby. Second thing is, when you're breastfeeding, eat allergens then, because again, a little bit of the allergens goes through and it starts to prep your baby's body to say, that's not dangerous, that's something that's okay. Because remember, an allergy is the baby's body saying that's something that's dangerous. And so if they've had it through pregnancy, they've had it through breastfeeding, it's good for them. And then quite early on in your weaning journey, you'll see in the Weaning Sense app, we do actually introduce peanuts to your baby, and then fish and egg and so on. So introducing allergens in that window, that 4 to 6 month window, is a really good idea, and not delaying it too long after 6 months. What about preventing picky eating? Well, what we find is that babies who have allergens introduced much later, not allergens, textures and strong flavors introduced much later, become more picky. And so if you're trying to prevent your baby from being a picky eater as a toddler, which should be on your radar, because toddlers are picky eaters often, one of the things you can do is introduce a wide variety of flavors, wide variety of textures as soon as possible. So you'll see in the app, and even in the Weaning Sense range that's sold through YouCook, we go actually quite quickly through the allergens and quite quickly through the textures, and we have lots and lots of different variety of combinations of flavors. So if we've got, we might have cinnamon going into oats porridge very early on as an example. So to prevent picky eating, to prevent allergies, introduce solids when your baby is ready, which is sometime between 4 and 6 months of age. All right, so one of the questions that one of you sent through yesterday, I didn't pick all of them, I just picked 1 or 2. This was one of the questions. If the World Health Organization recommends weaning at 6 months, what should be the reasons for initiating weaning from 4.5 months? So I'm going to play this response from the dietitian Kath Megaw. I'm going to ask you all, please, to give me in the chat below a thumbs up or just a number 1 or something, or just say yes if you can hear the sound, because when I started up today, the sound did look like it might be tricky. So if there's no sound, please let me know in the chat.
Hi, I'm Kath Megaw, a pediatric dietitian and co-author of Weaning Sense with Meg. It's wonderful to speak to you today. I'm going to discuss when you introduce solids to your baby, because there's a lot of controversy about this. Some people say 4 months, some people say 6 months, some people say between 4 and 6 months. So when is it? Let's just briefly talk about the World Health Organization, or WHO. They stipulate that you should wait until about 6 months and exclusively breastfeed your baby up until then. This is because the World Health Organization works in developing countries where there's little or poor access to good, healthy, nutritious, solid food for babies. And the longer that these parents can breastfeed, the better chance there is that these babies will be healthy. However, in first world countries, organizations like the Association for Pediatrics in America, Australia, Canada, and the UK, as well as the big global organization SPGAN, say it is very safe to introduce your baby between 4 and 6 months of age. And the reason being is that by 4 months of age, your baby's gut is developed and well attuned to being able to take solids safely. It is also allergy protective if you introduce solids earlier on than later, especially your allergy risk solids like your protein foods, your egg protein, your cow's milk protein, and your nut proteins. So it's perfectly safe to introduce solids to your baby between 4 and 6 months of age if you have access to good nutritious solids.
Brilliant. So there you have it from Kath Megaw, who is a really incredible pediatric advisor. There's no question that although the World Health Organization does recommend breastfeeding in developing countries, that is more to do with health and access to healthy food than it is to do with babies not being able to actually digest food between 4 and 6 months of age. So there you have it. I hope that does answer your question. All right, okay. So just a little bit before we go on to the next section of what to introduce, this is just, I'm going to just take you through how to drive your app, just in case some of you don't know. So this is your home screen, as you know, and this is the feeding section up here. And if you click on there, you'll come through to the feeding page. This is the milk toggle. So when you're ready, you just toggle it across. It'll ask you when your baby started with solids. You can pop in the date, and they have popped in my date for when my baby started on solids. And that will then transition me to the solid screen. And from there, you've got your recipes, you've got your feeds that happen down here, including when to introduce solids, milk and milk as well. And then if you click on the featured recipe, you'll actually see up here at the top, there's a toggle to Weaning Sense, where you can actually find recipes from the Weaning Sense book, which will reference the book page. And then obviously the app ones as well, which are on this side. So there's the Weaning Sense ones. You'll just see, it'll just tell you, there'll be a page number for those ones. And for the in-app ones, there's a page number 149. And for the other ones, you can actually make up the ingredients onto your shopping list. You just click there. And there's also an Instant Pot variation, so you can do it in your Instant Pot if you would like to. If you love a recipe, favorite it, and then it'll always be one that you can reference back to. Okay. And this is just how to do the shopping list, and we'll go back and have a look. Here's the shopping list over here, and there's all the things that are on my shopping list for this week. So that's how you use the app. You can share that shopping list as well. So I hope you do find that really useful in terms of your feeding journey. Right, so let's go on to the what are you going to introduce? And here's another area of controversy. So if we had the controversy around the when, we've now got the what. And again, in the late 1990s, we were all told to put our babies onto cereals. And in those days, it was actually rice cereal. And we were told that's the most unallergenic food. And of course, we now understand that rice cereals are highly processed. They are 100% carbohydrate. Nothing wrong with carbs, but you're moving your baby from a very mixed food in breast milk, which has got, and milk, which has got fats, proteins, and carbs, onto a solid carb. So you're saying an automatic switch for that digestive system, switch into cereal and switch into carb. And of course, that probably isn't the best thing. So what we do recommend, both in the Weaning Sense book and in the app, is to move your baby onto veggies first. So here's an example of one of our early feeds, which is baby marrow and cheese. Baby marrow is a fabulous first veggie. In terms of ideal foods to start with, I personally like all the yellow and orange veggies. So that's sweet potato, butternut, baby marrow, all of those sort of things are just really ideal foods as first foods. You can also then start to introduce in some fats quite early on. And you can see in this recipe, which is an early feeding recipe, we've actually got some white sauce in it, some milk and cheddar cheese and butter that we're actually making into white sauce. And there's nothing wrong with that, because there what we're doing is we're adding in some lovely fats and proteins in along with our carbs, which are obviously our carbs are in the baby marrow. So that's how to really get your combinations in. One of the best foods imaginable, like really one of the best superfoods, is actually avocado, because avocado very closely replicates what breast milk's composition is. So it's got that lovely fats. It's got a nice combination between fats and carbohydrates. So mashing a teaspoon of avo into any food that you're offering your baby is a really good idea. And of course, we all love avos. Most of us do. All right, so that's your ideal foods to start with. Also, in terms of textures, I think I've spoken about this quite a lot. We really do want babies to have textured food from early on. If your baby has very smooth food early on, they're going to get stuck on that smooth food, and then they are going to be more likely to be picky and not move on to different textures at about 8 or 9 months. So my suggestion with regards to textures is, first of all, if you can make the food at home, it does mean that you are never going to get it smooth enough. So it's your food. It doesn't matter how much you muesli it with your stick blender or in your NutriBullet, you will never ever get it as smooth as shop-bought jars of food. So those shop-bought jars of foods are almost slimy, they're so smooth. And then that's often why babies won't move on to the more textured food. So please include those textures early on. Then, of course, we've got our combination of foods. So again, old history used to say, stick to one food and then only introduce one food type at a time. We definitely don't believe that. We believe that you can put in little combinations of food as you go along. So start off with one single food, like a butternut, say, for instance, and then go quickly onto a butternut plus sweet potato, and then a butternut plus sweet potato plus avocado. So you start to introduce your combinations into meals quite quickly. And that is what we do. You'll see it in the app. We take you through quite rapidly, just introducing different flavors in different combinations. One of the questions that I often get asked is, what about processed food versus fresh food? So processed food is anything that when you look at it, doesn't look like the food that you got out of the ground. So obviously fresh food is when you've got the ingredients, where processed food will be something that's been shop bought really usually. Problem with processed food is it's usually got a multitude of things in it that you don't actually know what it is. And one of the rules of thumbs that you can use is, if you look at food packaging and it has any ingredient in it that you don't recognize, just don't buy it. Don't give that to your baby. So if it's got E numbers, if it's got any numbers on it, don't give it to them. If it's got things like modified starch, who knows what modified starches? Don't give it to your baby, okay? If it says butternut and water, we know what that is. So try and choose foods with 3 or less ingredients if you are buying shop-bought food. You can rest assured, for those of you who are buying the Weaning Sense food through YouCook, that is only ingredients that is going in there. It's like it's made in your own kitchen. But just be careful with that processed food. And then lastly, just try and buy seasonal. The minute you're buying strawberries in winter or citrus in summer, it's probably been shipped from overseas, which means that it was probably picked and was last on a tree more than a month ago. It's then been refrigerated, shipped. And so seasonal foods just are much, much fuller of, or much more full of nutrition and vitamins and minerals. So try and go for your seasonal. All right. Okay, so let's ask Kath, what are the best foods to introduce to your baby? And let's see what she has to say.
Hi, I'm Kath Megaw, pediatric dietitian, co-author of Weaning Sense with Meg, and it's great to be sharing this next segment with you. The question is, what are the best first foods to introduce to your baby? Do you do infant box cereals, or do you give your baby fruits and vegetables that you eat in and that you find in your home? What do you start with? And my suggestion is to start as clean as possible, so minimal labels. The minute food's got labels on it with a load of ingredients, the risk is very high that there are going to be other ingredients that you don't really want your baby exposed to, like sugars and different emulsifiers and preservatives. So starting with seasonal fruit and vegetables that are grown at the time and available at the time, cost effectively when your baby's ready to start solids, is the way to go. So like butternut, apple, sweet potato, carrots, gem squash, baby marrows, those are all wonderful foods. Mashed bananas, absolutely delicious to start with. And those will be better because they've got fiber in it, they've got a lot of water in them, so they reduce the risk of constipation. When babies start on solids coming from a full liquid diet, they're very likely to get constipated, and so by starting them with lots of fibers and different flavors and tastes like your fruits and vegetables will prevent this happening. So those are really yummy foods, and they're also foods that your baby might see you eating. So when you have an apple, let your baby lick the apple.
Thank you, Kath.
Hi.
Right. Okay, so the next question we ask is, how do we introduce food? So just a couple of things around how to introduce solids. So the timing, the first solid meal when you're starting under 6 months, and I want you to remember this principle that anything over 6 months, solids is the priority, but anything under 6 months, milk is still the priority. So we want to always feed that first solids after a milk diet, after milk feed, because we don't want to take away the appetite for a milk feed. So we would not feed solids 10 minutes before milk because they're not going to want milk then, and milk is the priority under 6 months. So I usually say at around about 11 o'clock in the morning, but in the app, you'll see that we actually pop in the exact times of day that are right for your baby to have their first solids. Have your baby seated in something where they are supported, so they can sit in a high chair if they are quite robust, or they can lean back in one of those kind of bouncy chairs, but just make sure your baby's quite well supported for that first meal. Your spoon needs to be quite flat, almost like a little scoop, and a soft plastic is what we like, so that it isn't sore on little teething gums. Your first food must be flavorful, and one of you has already asked the question in the chat, when do we introduce spices? You can introduce spices from very early on. In fact, you will see in our recipes that one of the first recipes we've got is carrot cake porridge, which is oats porridge with some carrot and some nutmeg and cinnamon, so that you can see your spices coming through very early on. And when you introduce solid spices nice and early on, you end up then with a more flavorful diet, and babies are less likely to be picky later on. Lots of variety, I've already mentioned, and bringing in your allergens as soon as your baby's ready, which if you're following the app, it'll introduce them all at the right time. And then I've already touched on this. What about home cooked versus shop bought? I do prefer home cooked. That's why we wrote the Weaning Sense book, but there's nothing wrong with good shop bought wholesome food. Just make sure that it hasn't got too many ingredients, that it's not too smooth, that it's got strong flavors, and it's got nice textures as well, because that's what we're looking for. And of course, for all of you who are starting on the weaning journey, the best way to do this is to actually make in bulk and then freeze. I don't know how many of you know, but Kath Megaw and I run a weaning course. So as soon as you start to ready to wean, we actually take you through a 5-week course in which we actually give you a plan to introduce all the right solids at the right time. Plus you get a Q&A session with us every week. And I think our next Weaning Sense course is launching in the next 2 weeks. So do watch out for it. It certainly is something that is worth getting involved in. Right, so I'm going to go on now to a little tidbit of information around your baby's own personality, because babies do wean differently because they're individuals. And I'm going to take you through the 4 different sensory personalities and how they wean. So you can see that some babies, these are all little babies enjoying lemon. Some of them love it, like these little babies up here who thinks it's absolutely fabulous, and that one who's explorative, and this one who looks happy. This one looks particularly unhappy with exploring lemon. So what is that all about? Why do some babies respond differently to food? Well, we all have different sensory temperaments, and these are our 4 different sensory temperaments. I'll take you through them quickly. They are very, very well explained in the Weaning Sense book. So on this side over here, well, across the top over here, we have little ones who have a high threshold for sensory information. In other words, they don't really sense everything that's going on in their world. So there's that H for high. They have a high neurological threshold, which means they've got a high pain threshold, high threshold for all sensory information. Now, they can either end up being settled babies who are very laid back because the world is going on around them and they don't even really notice. They're often your babies who sleep through early, who feed easily, and who are generally your very easy babies. My second baby was one of these, and I always call them con babies because they con you into going on and having a third. So your settled babies are very good babies. Some settled babies wake up at about 17 weeks or like 12 to 17 weeks and they go, hold on, the world's a whole lot more interesting than I had known. And they become what we call social butterflies. So they start to seek sensory information, they seek stimulation, they seek social engagement. So they're very interested babies. And of course, you can imagine they're going to wean very differently from other babies. Then down at the bottom here, we've got the kids with the low threshold. So, and this, by the way, goes for all of us. Your husband will be maybe different to you. Your different children will be different sensory personalities. And if you've got twins, you've got a fabulous experiment going on there. So there you've got a low threshold, and the low threshold babies are much more sensitive. So everything that goes on makes them more sensitive. So there you have your sensitive little one. But what does happen with our sensitive babies is that some of them warm up and they become slow to warm up little ones. So they will be fine with something as long as they've kind of taken time to adjust to it and to get used to it. So they are slow to warm up babies. So let's look at how these 4 sensory personalities wean differently. So I just want to show you a little video. I love this video because it shows, this is twins, and that's why I said twins are the best experiments because you can always compare one with the other. But these are twins, and you can imagine which different sensory personalities they are. Can you imagine what do you think his brother is? You can see the one he's going for all the time, looking for social engagement. But the little one, obviously a slow to walk. Of a social butterfly on the left and a slow to warm up on the right. And so you can see that these babies are so different and that they're actually going to wean differently as well. So in your book, Weaning Sense, you'll see we actually have a checklist and you can work out, you can go through it and you can work out what your baby is. There is also a checklist that you can do on my website, which is megfaure.com, and you can actually fill it out there and it'll tell you what your baby is. So let's quickly look at weaning for these 4 different sensory personalities. So if your baby is a social butterfly, the first thing is that they are likely to show very early signs of wanting to wean. So remember I told you that one of the signs of wanting to wean is that they're on your lap, they're gregarious, they're looking at the food as it goes to your mouth, they're reaching for it. Well, these babies might even do it at 3 months of age. Does that mean we must wean then? No, it doesn't. So don't rush in with solids if they're showing you early signs of wanting to wean. Wait for that 4 month, please. Second thing is that these little ones bore very quickly when they get to bland and routine meals. So my firstborn was a social butterfly. I was, of course, in that age where you had to introduce rice cereal. He loved rice cereal when we started, but within a week, he absolutely hated it because it was boring. He wanted flavor. And so these little ones need to have foods added at a much more rapid rate. So when you find those social butterfly recipes on the app, favorite them, and then you'll be able to go back to them because those will be your little one's favorite. High flavor, lots of herbs, lots of spices, and lots of flavor. These little ones also tend to go off milk. So the minute they start solids, they start to stop drinking milk because they don't want milk. Milk's boring. It always tastes the same. They want to go for solids rather, and they eat a lot of solids because it's interesting, and so they destroy their appetite for milk. And I just want to put a little reminder in here that milk does remain the priority until 6 months of age. So you can offer solids after milk feeds until that age. Otherwise, you're going to have difficulties with your social butterfly and milk quantities. They can become picky toddlers, and if they are, you want to give lots of variety, lots of color, lots of new places to eat, social eating, family dinner tables, and nice strong flavors. All right, going on to your settled babies. Now remember, these ones have got high thresholds, very laid back. These little ones sometimes, because they've got these high thresholds, don't always feel all the signals from within their body that they are needing to eat. So you might need to actually feed them on a routine. And that's where the app is so useful. It'll guide you into introducing, right, this is when they have milk, this is when they have solids, because otherwise they don't give you those hunger signals. These little ones do tend to overeat once they are eating because they don't notice the signals for full. So you want to help them with words like, are you full? Got a full tummy now, so they start to learn actually when they are actually full and what their signals mean. These little ones also are quite easy eaters, so they generally breastfeed feed easily. They transition to a bottle easily. They transition onto solids easily, and when they're going onto more textures, they're absolutely fine with that as well. So these little ones tend to be your easier weaners. And then you've got, of course, your sensitive baby, where everything's a threat for them. So, and you know, I think I always talk about how these sensitive babies are in a state of hypervigilance. They really are on high alert a lot of the time, that kind of flight, fright, and fight. And I talk about this in a lot of depth in our weaning course. And as you know, if you're being hypervigilant, your appetite disappears. So if you're highly anxious, you don't produce saliva, it's hard to swallow. And so these are the ones tend to be more tricky eaters and more tricky weaners. So good advice with them is to wean them after a sleep and to keep the feeding zone quite calm. For these little ones, novelty prevents a threat. They don't like bright colors. They tend to only like the white foods. They tend to like very smooth foods. They don't like new flavor. And so for these little ones, you're going to go with your much more blander meals. And in the YouCook boxes, for instance, there is actually a box that is for picky eaters, which has got your much more bland recipes. And these little ones may have a resistance to solids. So they just refuse to open their mouth, and they're very picky eaters. And my caution there is don't let them fill up on milk, because if you fill on milk and you're a sensitive baby, you're just never going to start to engage with the food. Right, our fourth personality is our slow to warm up baby. So remember, these ones are sensitive, but they will take to things once they warm up to them. So for these little ones, textures and strong flavors often present a challenge. And so what I always recommend is on every plate, you have a few challenge foods and a few safe foods. So if you know that they're absolutely fine with very smooth butternut, but you don't think that they're going to be as happy to engage with aubergine, let's say, for instance, or with chunky pieces of cauliflower that's just been mashed, then you want to try and offer a little bit of the smooth and safe with a little bit of the challenge. And my recommendation is to have a challenge food on every single plate for these babies as you go along. So always have something in there that's a bit of a challenge that they will eventually start to take to. And you'll see on the next screen how that works. They often get stuck in a safe space on a sensory level. So they, like if you buy a shop-bought very smooth butternut, they're going to get stuck on that, and you're going to get to like 10 months old and you're going to battle to introduce more variety than that. So that's why with these little ones, I really recommend home-cooked food. Our Weaning Sense range is textured enough, so that's fine. But use homemade food or textured food from the start to prevent the slow to warm up baby getting stuck on very smooth textures. And remember with these little ones that when they feel like they're in control, they feel like they can predict what's going to happen. And so that makes them feel safer. So you can respect your little one's need for order and try not to fight at meal times. Just a little bit about sensory engagement. Babies have to, in order to eat a food and to engage with it, they first need to tolerate it, they then need to interact with it, and then often they'll only engage with it. And that's particularly for these slow to warm up little ones. So what does that mean? That means that sometimes babies just need to see the food for a while. So see it on your plate, see it on their plate, not touch it. Then they need to smell the food, and then they need to touch the food, and they'll touch it and they'll squish it and they'll throw it on the floor, but it won't go to their mouth. Then they'll taste it and spit it out, and then they'll only eat it. And this whole process can take up to 14 exposures. So bear that in mind when you're feeling the pressure to get your baby onto more solids, that actually it does sometimes take time. And then before we finish off, I do want to focus on the fact that weaning needs to be baby friendly. And when we talk about baby friendly, we talk about kind of dividing things into two camps. What is your responsibility and what is your baby's responsibility? So your responsibility with weaning is the what, where, and when. So the what is that you're going to give not too processed foods. You're going to give foods that have got high flavor, high nutritional content. and you're not going to let them fill up on milk if they're over 6 months of age, because if you're doing that, you are going to hamper their appetite. But if you're protecting their appetite and they're being fed on a routine, and that's why, I'm not fastidious about early feeding routines, because I know we've got to establish our milk supply, but certainly when we're onto solids, using the app to determine your baby's routine is a very sensible way to do it, because then you know that they are actually generating an appetite before the next meal, because we stage it in at the right time. So you must give the right amount of food at the right time, and make sure you're not chasing your little one around the house. So make sure that there is a high chair. So you can see that the what, where, and when is your domain. But your baby's domain, and all the A-type control freak moms are freaking out now, but your baby's domain is how much they eat. And so if your baby starts to refuse after the third mouthful, offer one more, and then let it go. And know that you've got another feeding opportunity coming up about 2 hours later, because that's what we do with weaning. It's very rapid. You have a milk, and then 2 hours and a snack, and 2 hours and milk, and 2 hours. And so you all the way through the day, you've got the opportunity for feeding. And then you don't have to worry about the quantity in that exact meal. Right, so just a little bit about our weaning routines. So the weaning routines are actually in the app, as you know. So this is an example here of a baby who is under 6 months. So this little one's just started solids, and they've got milk at 6:15 in the morning. They've got milk at 10 in the morning, and then they've got lunch at 11:45. So notice I've put that lunch just after the milk, so that they do have that, so that I'm not destroying their milk appetite. And you will be told in the app that it's a starter veggies or porridge at that time. Then at 2:15 you'll have milk, and then 5 o'clock. And in brackets, when you see little brackets around supper, that means that it's an optional, don't have to have it. And it usually starts about 3 days after they've started solids. So this little one had just started solids that week. And that would be 1 to 4 tablespoons of veggies with 1 teaspoon of fat. And your fat could be Avo. And then your evening milk. So this stage of weaning, which is this 4 to 6 month stage, is what we call the ready stage of weaning. It's just when they're exploring foods. And just remember that it's not about nutrition for this age. The nutrition's coming in milk. This is just about exploration. So if they skip a meal, doesn't matter. If they don't want to eat at that meal, doesn't matter. It's really all about exploration. So the purpose is to have your baby having exposure, to have texture grading. So to make sure that through that period of early weaning, you are increasing the amount of texture, and just not too late, because otherwise you're going to battle to get in all the variety you need to after 6 months. So what should you offer? Obviously, milk is the priority, absolutely priority at this age. And then you should have some nice breakfast ideas, things like your oats porridge with different flavors added into it. And then even in that 4 to 6 month old stage, you can start with eggs. So something like scrambled egg or eggy bread. So all of those recipes are in the app. And then, of course, you've got lunch and dinner options, which are vegetables, usually with some fats and proteins. From 7 months onwards, so this is an example of a baby. Oh, I didn't change that screen, sorry. So you will have an example of a baby who's after 7 months. And the aim there is lots of variety. So a couple of things, you can actually start to use what I call modified baby-led weaning. So from 7 months onwards, what I like to do is to offer a baby their own bowl of food, and then have your bowl of food. Now, your bowl of food for them would be mushed or mashed or pureed. And their bowl of food would be something that they can hold in their hands and get to their mouth. And that's kind of why there's a little bit of baby-led weaning coming in there. Right. Okay, so that I think brings us to the end. And before I answer the questions, I'm just going to take you through exactly how to use the Parent Sense feeding journey. So we take you through from breastfeeding tip all the way through to bottle feeding, and it covers every aspect of your baby's feeding journey. We'll have a look at milk feeds and how much, like here's on demand, 3 feeds a day. It'll talk you about solid feeds, exactly what to introduce then. We've got the meal plan where I will actually tell you, is it 2 meals today or 3 meals? And we'll take you through it, as well as when you click on these tiles over here, you come through to the recipe. And then, of course, you can add in it into your shopping list. And then, of course, we've got the tracking as well. So if you click on the little plus sign up at the top of the screen over here, it'll pull this up. And you can click on solids, and you can actually make notes of whether or not your baby has an allergic reaction, or if your baby likes the solids, just so that you know for reference. And if you're loving a recipe and you're worried that it's not going to appear next week, you can just click this favorites little button up here, and that will favorite it for you. So it'll sit in your favorites tab, which is on your home screen. In the recipe, we've got over 40 in-app recipes, which include things like banana custard, cheese omelette, basic oats porridge with banana, peanut butter, and prunes, hake, sweet potato, and coconut cream. So we've got all of these wonderful recipes. And then we've also got 55 recipes from Weaning Sense, but we don't have the actual recipe in there because we want you to go and have a look at that in the book. So you can do that in the book. Right, so that brings us to the end of today, and I'm going to answer some questions now. Just so that you know, next week we are going to be giving you a 25% discount off if you have not already got a premium subscription. So if you are on a monthly subscription, it'll be coming to you with a voucher code in an email this week, and you can also gift that to your friends, of course, as well. So watch out for that. All right, so I think with that, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to go across to our Q&As because I can see that there are lots and lots of Q&As. So let's get those up. Sorry. There we go. Right. Okay. So I'm going to jump around a little bit. So for those of you who didn't answer early on, that's fine. Okay. So Lara, you got your question really nice and early. My baby's just over 7 months. We've started solids just after 6 months. She had her readiness signs then. So well done, Lara, for watching for that. But she wants nothing to do with veggies, porridge, or mixed veggie meals, homemade or shop bought. All she wants is fruit, and specifically purity fruit. We keep trying and she always tastes first. She realizes it's veggies or porridge. She closes her mouth and turns away repeatedly. If she tastes the fruit, she opens her mouth wide. Any advice? So Lara, this is one of the reasons why we do introduce solids a little earlier. So it's not a problem that you waited, because you waited for those readiness signs. But just a couple of things. We do recommend mixing fruit in with vegetables. You know, I think there was also, again, another piece of confusing advice. Don't mix fruit with vegetables. Why on earth? Definitely put fruit in with vegetables. So like, for instance, one of our Weaning Sense foods that You Cook is selling has got, I think it's got fruit, apricot in, and a whole lot of fruits that have got in with chicken. And so definitely pop in your fruits into your savory meals as well. Put fruit into your porridge. And if she really wants fruit, then just put a little bit less fruit each day as you mix it in with the porridge. So you can start off with mainly fruit and a little bit of porridge and go that route. Lara, it does seem to me that she potentially is a slow to warm up baby. I'm not sure. Try and get her to move onto home foods, you know, and off the purities. One thing I do want you to know is that some babies go for that very smooth, and then they skip the lumpy stage altogether and then go into whole foods. So start to put whole foods on her plate that's well steamed. Don't worry about choking. Just crush the food. If it crushes between your fingers, it'll be fine. She won't choke on it. All right. Okay, so this is from Tracy, when should the last meal of the day be served before allowing enough time for an efficient breastfeed before bedtime? How many hours should I stop the last mouthful? Okay, good question. Again, watching the app, you'll see that we recommend suppers at around about 5 o'clock and your last feed of the day is 6:30. And that will be absolutely fine to leave enough time for that. Dora, my little one is a difficult formula drinker. At the moment, he's not interested in solids, even though he watches us eat. At what age is the latest he should start without being concerned? So definitely 6 months. I don't like babies going after 6 months without starting solids, because particularly if he's been a tricky formula drinker, he potentially is one of our sensitive or slow to warm up babies. And so you're going to want to get that gap in before he gets more and more picky. So Dora, get those solids in fairly quickly is my recommendation. And if he is, one of the things I would do, and you said he's not interested in solids, is start to limit his his milk meals so that he does have appetite for solids. And by that, I mean, watch the app. So 4 or 5 feeds, depending on his age, in a day, and then making sure that you've got nice spaces so he does have appetite for those solid meals. Okay, so this is Bianca. Hi Meg, I've recently been using the Parent Sense app. It's been pure bliss using this app. But however, with one of the slides you've just shown, I've noticed that I don't have access to the recipe sections and shopping lists. Am I doing something wrong? Please advise. Great question. So Bianca, the reason you don't have access to the recipes is that you haven't toggled across and gone to go and look for that solid toggle. So up at the top of your feeding page, you will actually see that there is, and I can just quickly see if I can show you on here. Let's see if I can get across to my young baby. So I have babies of all different ages. So let's have a look. This is my baby who is on solids. If you have a look up here at the top of my screen, there's a little toggle there, and I can move her back across to milk. It'll ask me, does she want to start? Did she stop with solids? I say yes. So now I'm on milk. And then all you need to do is when you get to that little toggle, you just tick across and then, oh, there we go. Has she started with solids, then you'll tick yes. And then it'll give you a date, and then you've got your recipes there. Your recipes, so you'll have solids there and your recipes there. So have a look, Bianca, see if it works. If it doesn't work, please get in touch with us, but I don't think we've had any complaints about that. Okay, so this is from somebody else saying, I think that I have missed the window to introduce texture. My baby is 8 months old, hates textures. I don't know what to do. He gags until he throws up and chokes often, like it goes down his windpipe. Feeding is extremely scary for me. Oh my gosh, I completely know what you're talking about. And this is a big problem for a lot of moms and babies. My recommendation with this one is to go for, is to miss the lumpy stage and to go into whole food and to cut it into very small pieces. So little almost like little sticks the length of his little finger like that. And to have it well steamed and see if he sucks on that. And then very importantly, I want you to know the difference between choking and gagging. So when babies gag and they go, that's gagging, it's nothing. The food comes out. It's not a dangerous thing, okay? Choking is when something's in their windpipe, and that is scary. And that is very, very unusual for babies to be doing regularly. So I don't think that your baby's probably choking. It's a gag. Try not to let him see the fear on your face, because it will reinforce for him that this is a really scary time, and that might make things worse. Okay. All right. This is also, if I use coconut cream, can I use the cream that comes in a tin? Yes, you can. There's no problem with that. All right, this is a question on timing from Gretchen. My son has just turned 5 months old. He isn't reaching for food on our plate yet, but he's watching our food from the plate to the mouth, even mimicking the chewing motion. He fits into the settled personality type. Do you reckon we start now? Yes, I do. I think it's a great time to start. I think 5 months old is a good time. And I do think that sometimes they won't show all of the signals, particularly, like you said, those settled babies. This question is, how does the timing differ for a prem baby? So we've actually factored that into the app. So if you put in that your baby is prem, it will tell you to start solids at the right time. And actually it is 17 weeks adjusted age for 17 weeks for those babies as well. Or later, obviously. All right, so Robin says, my baby's 9 months old, is breastfed. Is breast milk still the main priority until 12 months? No, it's not. So milk of any sort, breast or formula, is the priority, absolute priority, till 6 months. And then from 6 to 12 months, it's a mix of both. And then from 12 months, it certainly is solids. But no, it's more important to be getting solids in from 6 to 12 months, and certainly at 9 months. Okay. Okay, so this is a lovely question. Must we stop feeding when our babies cry? So yes, if your baby is showing you that they don't want any more, so they've closed their mouth, they've turned away, and you keep trying to shovel in, and then they start to cry, please stop. Remember what I said, what is their domain? Their domain is the how much. So if they've said that they're full, just let it go. There will be another feeding opportunity, and it's not going to impact their nighttime sleep. Don't worry. That's one of the worries that we do have. All right. Next question, let's have a look. So here's a question from Charisma. She says, Karishma, hi Meg, can we take advantage of the upcoming app discount if we're currently still pregnant? Baby's only due in late April. Yes, you certainly can. You just go on, you buy the app, it gives you lifetime access. So if you want to load a baby in, that's fine. And then we can help you delete that baby once your real baby's born if you want to, so that you can play with the app, or you can actually play with it in its pregnant state. So we'll upgrade you to lifetime anyway, and then you play with it in a pregnant state. We have a pregnant state on the app. All right, good question is, can we have a digital version of the weaning book? So you'll know that inside your app at the bottom, you can actually buy digital versions of my books. The only one that we don't have available yet is the Weaning Sense book. I'm really sorry. So at this point, it is only in hard copy. All right. Okay, then let's see the next one. Kirsty, my 10-month-old is weaned very well. He's less keen on mashed food now and wants solid pieces. Good boy. With this, he spits out a lot, as he always puts too much in his mouth, and I'm worried he doesn't get enough at a meal. Any advice on quantifying how much is enough when eating solid pieces? Yeah, so that's a great question. And that's actually why I like the 2-bowl approach, because for us control freak moms, I was one of those A-type moms, needed to know how much was going in. You've got your bowl, you can shovel in a couple of mouthfuls, and then he's got his bowl, which he can control and eat. And then don't worry about how much goes in. I know that it feels like 90% ends up on the floor with the dog eating it and only 10% going in, but that 10% is probably enough for your baby. And particularly, as I said, because we've got so many eating opportunities in the day. I love this question. Can coconut oil be added to meals as a fat substitute for avocado? Absolutely. Coconut oil is one of the ones that we do recommend for sure. Okay, Tamlin, how to prevent constipation. Yes, so constipation definitely happens with weaning. A couple of tips. First of all, the minute you start weaning, offer a little bit of water at the end of every meal in a dinky feeder, a little bottle, a little bit of water after every meal or in a cup, because we do want more liquids going in. Babies don't need tea or fruit juice, but water is a good idea after meals. Another thing is to add in your fruits that really stop constipation. Things like prunes are a really good idea. You can steam your own prunes and then kind of muesli it in a blender and then add a tablespoon of prunes to every single meal, because prunes can go with everything. It adds a bit of sweet flavor as well. And then if your constipation is really bad, and remember that there is a difference between constipation and just trying to force a poo out. So if your baby's trying to force a poo out and it comes out all pasty and soft, that's not constipation. But if your baby forces a poo out and they come out a little book drollikies, little hard pellets, then we definitely do need to address that. And with that, you need to see your pediatrician and they'll give you a stool softener. All right, Antoinette asks if we can ship the Weaning Sense book to Egypt. Yes, we definitely can. Please just on the questions email that you'll see in the app or else on the website, just send us a question asking to ship to Egypt, and Michelle will respond to you, and she'll be able to we'll be able to ship that to you. Rochelle asks, what is the best cereal to give your baby to start your baby on? Store-bought Cerelac or oats made at home? Okay, so first of all, Rochelle, don't start your baby on cereal, start them on vegetables. That's my recommendation. But if you do want cereal, and we do introduce it quite early on in the weaning recipes, you'll see that it's there. But I do prefer homemade oats. So just buy a box of oats, just oats, jungle oats porridge, any oats porridge. You can actually grind it and muesli it while it's still dry if you want. So you can almost make a powder that looks like rice cereal. Or if you want to, you can muesli it after it's already been cooked. Either way, and that's the best option there. Okay. All right. Okay. Does the app have vegan recipe options? No, it doesn't. We haven't gone down that road yet, Tamlin. All right. So this is a fabulous question. Very important question. What should we look for if your baby is having an allergic reaction to food? So let's talk about allergies a little bit. So a baby will almost never have an allergic reaction on the first exposure to the food. And the reason for that is that babies, the way that an allergic reaction works, and for those of you who want to know more about allergies, get our book, Allergy Sense, Kath and my book, Allergy Sense. So what happens is that your baby's body sees something, and let's just take as an example peanuts. And if you introduce the peanuts, let's say late, or if, say, for instance, they are going to be allergic, the first time they see peanuts, the body sees peanuts, they're not going to react. The second time they have peanuts, there will have been an immune response that would have been mounted. So the body would have said, hold on, that thing looks dangerous. It looks like it's something that needs to be fought. And it would have mounted an allergic reaction to, or histamine reaction to this food. And then the next time you have it, the second and the third time that you have the allergen food, that's when you'll see the reaction. So the things you should look for, obviously, is rashes immediately around the mouth, swollen lips. Obviously, if the baby's battling to breathe, that's an anaphylactic reaction, that's an emergency reaction. But things like rashes or rashes all over their body, those are the type of reactions that you should be looking for. But if you do want to know more about the allergic signs, do get hold of the Weaning Sense book. Okay. Okay, another great question. Do we have to stick to one food for a few days before changing or adding in another food? So that was, again, the old theory, like 1 week on each food and then, slow introduction. We now know that's not necessary. The only ones that we do that for are our potentially allergenic foods. So your very first food that you ever introduce, do that one for a couple of days, maybe 1 or 2 days, just so that you can just see how things are going. That's the first one. Peanuts, fish, egg, dairy, any of those, you can just give twice in a row before you do the next one, or even 3 times in a row. But we do that for you in the app. So you don't have to worry. You'll see that you'll have peanuts like 3 days in a row in the app. And that's because we're doing exactly that. And in between those days of having those 3 peanut introductions, you'll have no other new foods going in, so that there's no confusion. But the app does it for you. You don't have to think about it. But the answer is yes. Stick to one food for a few days before changing, just for your allergen foods and for your first food. All right. This is a good question. Does the food lose nutrients when you freeze it? So it doesn't lose too many nutrients. Vitamin C is lost when you cook. So the only way you're going to get vitamin C in, because it's a very unstable nutrient, vitamin is by having raw. So that's why strawberries and citrus are good. But it loses slight nutrients for a period of time for storage. But there's nothing wrong with freezing the food at all. And certainly the nutrients that are going in when you've frozen your food at home but made it at home are way better than what you would get in a little jarred bottle of food. Okay, so this is a very interesting and controversial question, Meg. My pediatrician says that my baby's 4-month sleep regression may be worse because I haven't started introducing solids yet. What is my thoughts on this? Okay, so I never want to contradict what a pediatrician says. However, I'm going to tell you a couple of things, and this is part of my sleep course, is that sleep regression is associated more with learning how to self-soothe than it is with nutrition. It just happens to coincide with the time when we do introduce solids. So there's no quick fix. Like if you introduce solids at 4 months, your baby's not going to sleep better that night. And all of you, I'm sure, would attest to that. How many of you, put a number 1 in the chat if you thought that introducing solids was going to get your baby to sleep through the night and it made no difference, because the reality is it makes no difference on that night. Okay, so I'm sure for most of you, and there we go, quite a few people saying absolutely, made no difference. Okay, we thought it would make a difference, it made no difference. What does happen is that when you introduce solids early on, so from 4 months, by the time you get to 6 months, you're on a much more robust diet. You're on 3 meals a day, plus you've had proteins. And at that point, solids do make a difference. So it's more that introducing solids at around 4 months gives you a long enough runway to get up to a wide variety of solids and enough food to actually make a difference. So if you're only introducing solids at 6 months of age, it's 1 solid meal a day. And by then, babies are potentially needing, in order to sleep well, 3 meals plus protein. And so it's not so much that introducing solids is a magic wand, but it does make a difference later on. All right, we've got 3 more minutes. And so I'm going to, oh my goodness, there are just thousands of questions. I'm going to go right down to the bottom because I'm feeling bad for the ones who've just asked now. Okay, so I'm going to go down and I'm going to work backwards from the bottom. So, and if there are any app questions, I will preference those. So if you've got app questions, please do ask those, because those I want to make sure that I do cover those. Okay, so this one is from Alison. She says, from an OT perspective, what is your take on feeding in a bumbo seat? I've heard mixed reviews that it's not good for their core. Okay, bumbo seats are poison. They are absolutely not okay for babies. They are dangerous because what happens is that often we'll put our bumbo seat up on the top of a kitchen counter, and it's actually one of the big causes of head injuries of babies actually toppling off. So the first thing is it's not good in terms of safety. Second thing is it's terrible for babies' cores, because what happens in a bumbo seat is that they just are supported so that they don't have to do any work around that middle area. And the problem with bumbo seats is we end up using them too often. And so it does hamper the development of their core muscles, which will affect their crawling. All right. This one from Leslie. My baby is a very picky eater. Loves his Wheat Bix for breakfast, but literally only wants peanut butter sandwiches and yogurt. I really struggle to get him to eat fruit and healthy meals. Okay, so that 15-month-old picky eater is very, very classic. And you can see that what your baby's doing is going for the whites, which is basically your processed carbohydrates, which is Wheat Bix, peanut butter, sandwiches, and yogurt. All are white and cream colors. And that's often sometimes to do with being a slow to warm up or sensitive baby. But what I would do, Leslie, is I would keep going with what those are, because by the way, that's quite a nice diet. I mean, he's got nice carbs, he's got his peanut butter, he's got his yogurt for protein, and he's having sandwiches, so fabulous. But now start to kind of link him onto something else. So start to have little rice cereal. So stick with the same color. So go with all the creams, but have like a rice cracker, or have a little chicken nugget, or a little fish finger, or try and stick with all the same color, but give them different texture and different flavor. Always put a challenge food on the plate. And then you can also then go for the same color in fruit, so pear as opposed to strawberries. So just kind of stick within your color gambit, but make sure that you then are kind of adding in other variety. And as I say, always with toddlers, have a challenge food on every plate. So every plate must have something he will eat and something he may or may not eat. And then he'll slowly but surely get onto it. All right. Okay, so this one's from Ashley. It does have to do with the app. So as I said, I'm going to preference these ones. She said, I have the monthly app subscription. We'll definitely be upgrading when you send the special out. Thank you. I love the app. One thing that concerns me is that I have not been following the food properly on the app. I've been doing a lot of different things, making my own, bought, etc. I want to start Allergens now. If I start using the app properly, now have I missed a million allergens and important introductions? Surely the app doesn't know that I haven't been using it properly. Can I rewind? Okay, so it's a great question. Ashley, just quickly below, just pop in there, what age is your baby? Just so that I know how many weeks, because that will tell me whether or not you should go back. 6 months old. Okay, so for 6 months old, I wouldn't go back. Okay, so now what you want to do is you just want to keep going. The app at 24 months anyway, 24 weeks, sorry, not 24 months, 24 weeks anyway, won't allow you to go back to start the solids journey again. It then takes you into the older baby journey. So that does change. But I would just go with exactly what's on the app now, because your baby's at the age where they should be having all of those allergens anyway. But if you are worried, because let's say you haven't done peanuts yet, let's just say, then do those meals. If there's a peanut meal, then ignore that there's a fish meal next on the same day, let's say, for example. Okay, so if you haven't introduced peanuts, that's all right, don't worry. So what you're going to do now is for every allergen, you're not going to do a different allergen until you've done that allergen 3 times. So if you do peanut butter, and that particular day on the app is a fish recipe, don't do the fish recipe, okay? Do something that has got no fish in it, and then do that peanut butter 3 times. And then you know that he's not allergic to peanuts, and then you can go on to the fish ones or the egg ones. So those are the 3 main ones that you're gonna watch out: your fish, your egg, and your peanut. But don't worry that you haven't been following it, and don't worry that you have done making your own and shop bought and the Weaning Sense. Don't worry about it. The app does guide you nicely, but it's not supposed to be the only way to do it. It's supposed to be able to be used with flexibility. And your question around whether or not you do egg yolk and egg white separately, no, you do the whole lot together, obviously starting with cooked egg, and that would be in a scrambled egg. So I would just do a scrambled egg tomorrow morning, and no peanuts, no fish for the next few days while you get him used to egg, and then you can watch on the 2nd and 3rd introduction. If there's no reaction, he's absolutely fine to go ahead. All right. Okay, let's see another one. Okay, so okay. So I'm going to this is my last question, because we actually are going over time. So very last question from Darren. I love the app, but it seems to have gone ahead of where I am in the weaning stage. I'm in week 2, 2 meals following the book. When I toggled, it jumped straight onto week 22, which is 3 meals. I can't seem to change the date to go back into line. So can I follow the app recommendations more easily? So if your baby's 22 weeks old, which is what it sounds like, and you are worried about how fast it's gone, just toggle back and go back to feeding. So you toggle back to milk. So toggle your solids across and it'll say, have you stopped weaning? And then you say yes, and then it'll then allow you to then start the process again, just if you're wanting to slow down a little bit. Any of you can do that. So now we are going to give away a prize of the Weaning Sense book. And in order to win that prize, you need to fill out the survey. So as I finish this webinar today, a survey will pop up. And if you fill out the survey, you stand a chance to win the Weaning Sense book. So thank you all for joining me. I hope that you have found this incredibly useful. I've loved spending the Saturday morning with you, and thank you for using the app. And yeah, keep the feedback coming. We're always making changes to make it better. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.